So I have a question.
Okay.
That refers to this morning talk. You, at the end, you said that quantum physics doesn't speak about reality, but about experience. Could you just explain this sentence?
Right. Yes. It's like while classical physics can be formulated coherently without involving the notion of an observer, so can be formulated as dealing with an objective world in which an observing consciousness is completely marginal. It can stay out of the picture. It's like for a classical physicist, the observer doesn't need to be in the picture. If anything, it's kind of disturbing to have it in the picture. We're trying to keep it as much as possible. That's no longer the case with quantum physics. Quantum physics, even the simple enunciation of the theory, you could see it as consisting of two basic elements. One, what we call the wave function, or the state vector of the state of the system, that evolves according to an equation, which on the most simple level is the Schrödinger's equation, and then a prescription that connects the wave function to what we actually see, results of experiments. And that prescription is essential. The wave function per se does not tell us anything, does not tell us anything that we see, anything that we measure. So there is like an attached a rule which, how do you go from the wave function to probabilities of results you can see? And the probability of the results that you can see involves this notion of the observer. And as we said this morning, it is one specific characteristic of the theory, one specific characteristic of the nature of the observer, that it's an embodied observer, so that each experience corresponds to the formation of a trace or recording of information in the body of the observer. So this is an essential part of the formulation of the theory itself. And the big difference between classical physics and quantum physics. We can no longer conceive of the world as if we were not there. Or you could say, as if seen from the eye of God. Classical physics is physics seen from the eye of God. Now our physics is only the physics as seen from inside the world, as seen through the eyes of an embodied observer. In that sense, it's like, we could call it the physics of experiencing. It doesn't tell us how things ultimately are. There is no concept of how things ultimately are. We've been trying to hold on to that with the notion of particle and wave. But actually, both notions are only, let's say, the last beach we can hang on to. Beyond it, there's just something which is beyond our representation.
in fact, our conceptual thought, because here we come to some important point about our attempts to understand reality. And if we see abstract thought, we find a pair of mutually opposite concepts. I mean, concrete words have no opposite. What is the opposite of a glass of water? Maybe a glass of wine, but you know, it's not so logical. The opposite of a glass of water is all that is not the glass, of course. So it's a generic opposite. The rest of the universe is not the glass. But if we have an abstract term like freedom, we have slavery, or if we have short, we have long, right, left. So all the abstract terms that we use, mainly use to describe reality, have this polarization in a pair of two mutually exclusive opposites. And they are mutually exclusive because, from a logical point of view, because of course, if something cannot be true and false at the same time. The either or is something either is long or is short, either is true or is false from a logical point of view. This either or way of functioning is what Alan Watts used to say, the play of black and white, and has an important function because as living beings, in order to survive, we have to take quick decisions. So the mind must very quickly to make a simple map, a simplified map of what is happening. And if what is happening is translated into black and white, that is into opposite of concepts that are a pair of opposite concepts, it's easier to choose the white and to discard black, and maybe you save your life if you are quick enough. So this either or way of functioning is not for me duality, it's just a way of functioning, like our neurons that either let an electrochemical pulse pass or stop. What I call dualism is when we transfer this mutual exclusiveness of opposites from logic into reality, and we begin to believe that reality too works that way. While in reality, opposites are really inseparable. If I have a piece of paper and draw a vertical line, I have right and left, two opposites. Something cannot be contemporary right and left. Either is right or is left. But if I ask you, please, I want to see only the right, don't draw me the left. How could you? Because the very line that distinguishes two opposites is the same line that makes them inseparable. So, coming to this problem of, for example, wave and particle, as far as I understand, thanks to your explanations, what is there is neither a particle nor a wave. Yeah. But we are obliged to use two opposites indeed, to describe the same thing, because that thing has is undescribable else in another way. So what quantum physics introduced, the revolution that has been introduced into science and also human understanding, I think it is an important aspect, is that opposite concepts became very much linked to something which is not properly neither one or the other, and so a new way of thinking is coming out of it.
Yes, yes, and what Mauro is saying, it kind of brings me to, it's worth probably spending a few words on abstraction and the function of abstraction in our science and in our thinking. And for that, we have to go a little way back, even before quantum physics and so on, to the scientific revolution of the 17th century, the 16th and 17th century. And what Edmund Husserl calls the mathematization of nature. And he connects it especially to the name of Galileo. Galileo is best known for his experimental work and his kind of accent on experiments, which is certainly fundamental. But maybe even more fundamental is this notion of that the book of nature is written in mathematical terms. The key element that comes into play is the notion that experiments can be repeatable, which allows like a scientific community to be born and to work together. An experiment that I do here in Titignano today can be repeated in Todi tomorrow or in New York in a month. That requires an operation of abstraction or reduction. It's like reality in its fullness is ungraspable. It's like the whole reality that's happening here with the swallows and us and everything, it's absolutely unique. There's no way to redo this experiment. But an abstracted version can be transmitted and redone and shared. So abstraction is a key step at the origin of modern science. Useful. The trouble is that we tend to confuse that for reality itself. And the abstract image of it becomes in some way more real than reality itself. We sometimes kind of view our own body in the language of the doctor more than through my experience of my own body. Or an extreme form of it, in my opinion, is money. Like this abstraction, which is like this conventional thing, supposedly just to ease exchange between people, becomes the ultimate reality, the governing religion of our time.
And there is a term in Sanskrit that many of you have heard about, that is the term Maya. No? And Maya means the collective illusion that, since it is shared, it gives a false image of the reality, but we believe that it is true. So it's interesting that the etymological origin of Maya is ancient Indo-European root, ma. And the original meaning that conveyed by that root, ma, is to measure. That's the original of the modern science, is to measure. From that root comes measure, matrix, mother, matter. Yes, and there is another root, man, that is not a derivation from that, but is linked together, often linked. Man, that means to think, to measure with thought, from which the Latin mens comes, the Italian mente, English mind, and so on. But it's interesting that in Latin, from the same root man, mind, comes also a verb that means to lie, mentire, to lie. So if, I like to do this play, to put together all these meanings, and to find just a line that connects these meanings. And when the mind measures reality by thought, and it puts out of it describes reality, and there is a description, conceptual description of reality, the map. If begins to think that the map is the territory, that the reality is like the map, then it lies. We in Italian say la mente mente o mentisce, means the mind lies. The lie is very dangerous because it's shared by many of us. Mark Twain used to say that the real danger doesn't come from what we don't know, but rather from what we believe it's true while it's not the case. So, you know the rope and the snake image. You enter in a room and you see a snake, so you are afraid, and then when there is more light, you discover that it is a rope. So this is used in India to explain the projection of Maya over reality. And Stephen Batchelor, a friend of mine, was saying it's much more dangerous the contrary. You think that there is a rope while there is a snake. And so, to measure, because Galileo, as Shantena underlined, modern science comes with two basic principles. One is the introduction of the measure, that is to translate what we observe, qualities, into quantities, into numbers, that then when you measure and translate what you are measuring into numbers, you explore the connections in mathematics formulas about those, and you can find the laws that of nature. That was very important. And the second one was the dualism, Cartesian dualism, that said that the observer, res cogitans, and the observed matter, they have nothing to do with each other. The observer can be put totally outside, apart from the observed. And that is necessary to have an objective science, of course. An objective science means a science that can describe what happens out there according to its own laws, independently from the one who observes, as Shantena was saying. And so when I observe and try to understand scientifically something, I suppose that when I have a mathematics description of the behavior of that system that I am observing, that system will do the same either if I observe it or if I don't. While in the quantum physics revolution, this is not the case. If you observe, it is, for example, a particle. If you don't observe, it is a wave or something like that. So, the measure and the quantity over quality, the primacy of quantity over quality, had unfortunately a bad consequence on the anthropological level that Shantena has underlined. I mean that the pure scientific thought would be this, that if I can't measure something, I cannot say anything about it from a scientific point of view. All what is not measurable, I cannot speak about it. That is the right scientific attitude. But what became this in the average man of the West with this religion of science, very naive religion, is that what is not measurable either doesn't exist or has no value at all. And so, all that is, for example, all our direct experience in first-person experience of tastes, all those things like love, dignity, all those things that cannot be measured are just undervalued, while they are the only ones for which life is worthwhile living, being lived. And so we arrive that what is instead made only of numbers, only of quantities, and doesn't exist in nature unless in our shared minds, like financial world. I mean, not real economics, but the financial economics that I think is 8 or 9 times more than the true real economics.
According to some sources, it's the 98%.
98% variable. That doesn't exist only in our minds, but since it is made only of numbers, of quantities, we believe that it is extremely real and can change the destiny of millions of human beings with their real existence. Huh? So
I'll add one comment to that. It's like our slavery of the measurable depends on the fact that being able to repeat things, compare, measure, and so on, gives us a certain amount of control over nature, which means like for all our technology. And so it means power. There's a certain power. So the element of power is absolutely fascinating for human beings. So it's like the abstract world we've built, it's a world measured, shaped by the drive to power. And the drive to beauty and love and so on is left out at that level. Maybe we should open the conversation to everyone.
Hi, thank you very much. This was a lovely conversation. I wanted to add an ironic comment about science and the scientific revolution, since you have dwelt on it so nicely, and point out, of course, that the 15th century, when the scientific revolution really took off, was also the century of the religious warfare in Europe. And so one can look at this fascination with repeatability in a very different way, as an extremely anarchic thing, as a very anarchic idea. Because the scientific revolution arose at this time when the church and the state were the two authorities, and these two authorities were at war, and there was terrible bloodshed everywhere, people being murdered in the streets and so on. And so science, in a sense, is a rejection of all that. And science says, look, forget about laws of God, and forget about laws of man, and we'll only have laws of nature. But no one will tell you what they are. We'll give you experimental instructions, right? We'll give you a method to run an experiment, and you go run the experiment, and you figure out what the laws are, because those are the only ones. So in an ironic twist, right, this turns into a drive for power. But you can also see it in historical context as just the opposite, a drive for anarchy and a rejection of all authority.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think that's another bit of the strangeness of history and the strangeness of us.
Yeah. I could add one comment to that in terms of paradox. Also, Descartes, that Mauro pointed to, that's another paradoxical story.
Yeah.
He starts with, like, what's the ultimate foundation of philosophy, and finds it in his own inner experience. Unfortunately, he formulated this as I think, which is loaded with consequences about what's seen as primary and what's seen as secondary. But the essence of it is like the primacy of consciousness.
Yeah.
But then the practical consequence of that, by separating these two dimensions, has brought to the complete oblivion of the consciousness part. Yeah.
But maybe because the mainstream of Western philosophy and way of thought was already dualist. I mean that since Plato, there was a stress and emphasizing duality between body and mind, or matter and soul. Then Christian era also, they developed the difference between the spiritual and the material, and the body. Is always, the body is always making problems. Because
and it's sinful.
Yes, no, it was sinful, but also for us, it is hungry, it is thirsty, and it is cold or is hot, and at last it dies. So we prefer to say, I have a body, not I am a body, because if we say I have a body, we identify with a small man inside the head, maybe behind the eyes, and so maybe that even when the body dies, this eye survives somehow. So there was this dualism that was prevailing in our philosophy, and so now when science modern science was born, it was very useful from an epistemological point of view to replicate this dualism and say, yes, the observer is outside the picture, so our science can be objective. But these already were putting a split between, apparent split between man on one side and nature on the other. I don't remember if Capra wrote this, or I read somewhere that one of the founders of modern science, besides Galileo and Cartesio and so on, was the English politician Bacon, and he had been un giudice, a judge. Magistrato, a judge for years, and he could see also some of the trials against witches, that women that were tortured and killed. And the strange thing is that when Bacon writes about nature, he says that nature, that the scientist must just to
put nature on the rack.
Yeah, on the rack, and per strappare, to catch its secrets. Yeah. You know, and so in the Western mind, woman, nature, you know, even in the religion, we have three persons of God, but what is missing is the feminine part. You know, so we were a little bit unbalanced as a religion, and so nature and woman were just something. Mother, nature and woman were put, and so this is at the origin of our ecological problems. To think that we are here and nature is over there. Well, we are just the same. So what we do to nature, we are doing to ourselves.
I am very happy you brought up money. And I had a glimmer of something. Something came together when you were speaking about money, and three things coming together. So 97% of our money supply, maybe 98%, is complete fabrication. When a bank makes a deposit in an account, it's just abstract number measured, dropped in an account.
In the computers.
Yeah. It's that. Plus, approximately the same percentage of the financialization of the global economy is also just that, those numbers, which are debt, which is nothing, which is air. It's just that put together, chopped up, sold again and again and again and again. So we're just in two incredible dimensions of unreality. And then you add the third, where 0.0000 whatever 1% of people on the planet own most of the wealth on the planet. So we have these three factors of compounded beyond our imagination unreality. And it gave me a glimmer how close we are with the simple shift of consciousness to reality. And it was such a hopeful glimpse, because often I feel, and I think many of us feel, the incredible power of this monetized reality that is driving so much that we grieve so much. And the glimmer was, oh my God, it's so much unreality driving this. And we're so close to reality. So it was a lovely glimmer and a hopeful one.
Thank you. Right. There's also one person back there.
Over there.
Hi. Appreciate all your comments. We can not only look in terms of where we came from, where we are, but where we're looking forward.
Sorry, I don't hear you.
Where
very
we
well.
can look forward.
Yeah.
I notice you're being recorded. So may I suggest, understand all the comments you made about measuring. But I would argue probably all of us are using a measuring device. We are recording, we have taken pictures, I see people with iPads and so on and so on. And then we all know the phenomena. Yeah. The video, some people were asked, how do you find it? YouTube, how many people like it? The more it becomes likable, whatever, it becomes the news about the news, what is real. When you think about it, the term is also then, it goes viral. So we use a live term to talk about something totally artificial. And my final aspect or question is, now we're talking about artificial intelligence, which is all digital, it's all creation, it's all numbers. What are your views about where we are, where we're going? And on a just footnote, PS note, you use the term Western mind. I've heard it since yesterday. And I do understand it, but maybe it's another concept where, for example, if you understand the basics of computer science, it's based on the Chinese typewriter. It was developed by the Chinese, not us. So, where do we stand going forward?
There's two people here.
Gymnastic.
Just to add on what he said, because you said that duality is being seen within the Western mind. And actually, I see duality everywhere, even within the Eastern mind, with Vedanta, I only see non-duality with the esoteric, framework, when it comes to mystical, movement, with every religion or with every, framework. But duality exists everywhere. There are only, some esoteric movement that, keep seeing the whole with the difference. But it's not only related to the Western mind. I don't think so. Yeah, and something else, sorry, just adding. Yeah, it's very interesting, the link you've made between the divine feminine or the sacred feminine and also duality. And there is a certain, path or movement going on nowadays between, going beyond duality through balancing, the divine masculine and the divine feminine within both, male and female. And the more the divine feminine is being repressed, the more, humanity is gonna get locked in duality. And meaning by sacred feminine or divine feminine, all that intuitive part of us, the fluid part of us, the watery part of us, the receptive part of us. So the more we kind of give back that power or that, to the sacred feminine within us, the more we kind of balance, think, and transcend duality.
Since there is only 1 minute, I can't explain so much, but science, the methodology of science was born only in the West. We have equivalents in complex cultures like India and China, where there is an empiricism looking at experience and rationalism to logically reflect on experience. But the real methodological scientific method, I mean the introduction of quantity, the measure and so on, only in the West came. And in Western philosophy, dualism has been prevalent, not the one. There are other philosophic secondary parts which were not dualistic. In the East, like India and China, non-dual thought developed with more freedom. So we have Vedanta, we have Shaivism, Kashmir Shaivism, we have Mahayana Buddhism, we have Taoism. So, and those kind of views, they were aware that logic functions, works in a dualistic way, logic, in either or. But they didn't automatically thought that that was the way that reality was functioning. There was not the coincidence between what becomes certain logically, it must be real. While here in the West, apart from, for example, sophists or some minor schools of ancient Greek, in all the time until Cartesio, Descartes, the coincidence between truth and certainty, if something is logically true, it's real, wasn't put into, it wasn't ever questioned, you know. Only Descartes began to question it.